This is an overview of why I think science points to the need for a creator or a god, and why I think the Bible is the best explanation for this god. The first reason is the creation of the universe from a god, or deity, or some type of intelligence seems to make more sense and be more plausible than the creation of the universe from nothing. Physics tells us that a true nothingness could not have created the universe. The nothing that created the universe must include the laws of physics and some type of energy. So either way, you can't get around the need for something to have always existed. The notion that something has always existed doesn't make sense to our brains that are stuck in time and space and inside the universe. So I don't think that a god that's been around forever, that wasn't created, is a totally crazy idea. Well, it is a total crazy idea, but there is no way to get the universe that doesn't involve a total crazy idea of something existing forever and not being created. And then, the other thing that goes along with this is the fine-tuning of the universe. What is the fine-tuning of the universe? It's the conditions or forces that are required for the universe to exist as it does today. The force of gravity is an example of fine-tuning. If gravity was slightly stronger or weaker, then the universe would not form as it is today, not in a way that's possible for life to begin. There's the electromagnetic force, which helps hold atoms together. If it was slightly weaker or slightly stronger, they wouldn't form in a way that allows the universe to exist the way it is. There is a strong nuclear force, which holds the nuclei of atoms together. If it was slightly stronger or slightly weaker, then atoms wouldn't form the way they do. So the fine-tuned universe is really all these different measurements of the different forces and conditions in the universe, that if they were slightly different, the universe would either not form or not form in a way that life could exist. The odds of all these factors being just right for life to form in the universe are infinitesimally small. One of the common ways that the naturalistic view gets around that need for a creator or an intelligence that designed the universe is the multiverse. If you have a multiverse where there is an infinite number of universes, then it doesn't matter that ours is fine-tuned, because it's just one of the infinite number of possibilities. So that's what we would expect. All kinds of universes. So if you get an infinite number of universes, then it's not odd that ours has these just right properties. This gets over the probability problem of one universe somehow having all these properties just right. Now, what would have created a process that can create multiple universes? We don't know. So that's still a problem. So, if you take the need for something to always exist, and the fact that our universe seems to be fine-tuned for life, to me, that points to an intelligence, and not just some naturalistic process that just happened to get it all right. Also, along the line of fine-tuning, all the forces like gravity, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, we don't really know what these are either. We can measure them, we can use mathematical equations to express them, but we don't know what the actual force is. For example, we don't know what makes gravity an attractive force that pulls things together, or how it works. We can just observe it. So again, we have some answers and theories, but there are still a lot of unknowns out there. The next reason is how the universe formed or began cannot be scientifically proven. With all the information we have available today, with all the experiments and discoveries we've made, it does seem like science has a lot of answers that make a pretty good case for the universe starting from nothing, or that they know how it started. But really, there's very few facts and just a lot of theories. We can't go back and measure the universe when it first started. We can't see what's outside the universe. We can't do experiments. We can't know any of this. We're stuck in space and time, and with a limited ability to look back in time. So there's no way to observe or test. Really, it's just theories that start with what we see today, and rewinding the expansion of the universe, making sure that the conditions fit with what we observe today. In fact, we still don't know what over 95% of the universe is. There's dark matter and dark energy, which both combined make up over 95% of the universe. Really, all we know is that the Big Bang Theory doesn't really work, and what we observe in the universe can't be true without some type of additional matter called dark matter. It's called dark matter because we can't observe it or detect it. We can just see the effects of it. And the same with dark energy. What we observe in the universe requires additional energy according to our current theories. But again, we can't observe or detect dark energy. So, These are just terms for undetectable forces, or energy in the universe, that are just theoretical. Now, it's not to say that they don't exist, and that we won't discover them at some point in the future. There's many experiments ongoing to try and detect dark matter and dark energy and determine what they are. But there have been many in the past to try to detect these, or know what they are, and so far we haven't been able to detect either of them. No theory has proven correct yet. So the search is still on for dark energy and dark matter. Like I said, it doesn't mean they don't exist. It's just over 95% of the universe is currently theoretical. So to say science has all the answers, or a majority of the answers, is pretty far from the truth. One of the other things we need for the Big Bang Theory to work is the inflation theory. This is the very rapid expansion of the universe very early on in its history. It had to expand super fast for a very short amount of time for what we observe in the universe to match the Big Bang Theory. Inflation is one of the theories that points to a multiverse, because once inflation starts, it goes on forever. Now, it only lasted for a very small fraction of a second in our universe. If it lasts forever, and it's not currently going on in our universe, then inflation is happening somewhere else. So the theory is that inflation is creating multiple universes out there. Now, exactly what this process is and how inflation jumps around and creates a universe and then moves and goes and creates another universe, or universes just bubble up and float off somewhere else without interacting. We don't really know how that would work, but I'm not saying it's not true. It just seems to me to point towards some type of intelligence causing inflation and directing how the universes form with different properties and not interacting with each other. Not that there's this process that just somehow happens to create universe after universe after universe, and it doesn't just continue in one spot, or the universes bubble up and fly off into different places and don't really interact. And also with inflation, once it starts, like I mentioned earlier, it goes on forever, but it does have a beginning, so we still have the problem of a beginning. There must be a first universe that inflation started with. It's not like we get inflation and we say, oh, well, that solves the beginner problem or the need for a beginning. There still must be something that starts inflation. We're still stuck with something that's existed eternally, some type of energy, or something that kick-started this process and got inflation going. Now that we've looked at the universe itself, let's look at the formation of life. One of the most prominent theories on the origin of life is the primordial soup theory. The basics of this theory is that most likely lightning, or some type of energy, but most likely lightning, interacted with the chemicals in the atmosphere of the early Earth and formed the building blocks of life that built up in the ocean. Then they interacted together and somehow formed a cell that then somehow turned into life. One of the other theories is that the hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean were the energy source. The heat coming out of the vents into the ocean and interacting with the chemicals in the ocean created the building blocks of life. It's kind of the same process. The amino acids and other chemicals you need to build a cell built up in the ocean. Then they formed cells that then turned into life. But this theory has many problems. The first problem is creating a cell itself, with the cell wall that then contains the ingredients on the inside that you need to make a cell. To get a cell wall to form in the ocean on its own, with the ingredients on the inside, and then the ingredients to interact together to form a functioning cell, is highly unlikely and very complicated. Just because you have all the ingredients together in the ocean, you still must get them all together in the proper ratios inside of a cell wall and to interact together. The odds are not very good for this. Now, once you actually get life on Earth, there are still more challenges. Most scientists say life first started with only RNA, because DNA is way too advanced or complex to have formed in the primordial soup. So, they assume that life started as an RNA type and then evolved into DNA. There are 0 examples of this in the fossil record, and everything alive today has DNA. This is just theoretical, and there is no proof of this. Well, let's keep going and say that life did form on Earth and somehow get to the point of having DNA. There are still more challenges. The transition from simple single-celled life to complex single-celled life does not fall in line with evolution. There are no gradual steps in the fossil record slowly transitioning to complex single cells. And if that happened, there should be some of those transitional cells that still exist today. But they do not. So, the most common theory to explain this is that one simple single-celled organism engulfed another simple single-celled organism, and they somehow formed a symbiotic relationship that benefited both. And then over time, the one that got engulfed by the other one turned into the different parts inside of a cell that then led to a complex cell. So again, there's zero evidence for this. So all we know is, in the fossil record, there is simple, single-celled life, and then all of a sudden there is complex, simple-celled life. In evolutionary terms, this is a gigantic leap that does not make sense. Now, the next step in evolution is another problem: the jump from complex, single-celled organisms to multicellular organisms. Again, this is a huge leap in evolutionary terms, and there's no evidence that this slowly happened. Plus, there's reasons why it can't happen slowly, scientifically. So, with this problem, there's a few different theories on how this happened, but there's no evidence to support this in the fossil record. In the fossil record, we have complex, simple-celled organisms, and then suddenly multicellular organisms appear. And we don't know why. And not only is there not a good explanation for why this happened, the fact that it happened at all goes against evolution. There needs to be some type of fitness advantage for evolutionary changes to survive. From simple cell to multicellular, there's not really a fitness advantage, and if this leap happened, they should have evolved back to simple cells, because that's where the fitness advantage is. So there's multiple problems with multicellular life forming that we don't have good answers for. Now, since the odds of all this happening are astronomically small, there's another camp that believes that life began somewhere else in the universe and was transported to Earth. This is known as panspermia. This would be single-cell life that was on an asteroid, comet, or space dust, and was carried through space from some other planet to Earth. It had to survive the journey through space and the crash into Earth. Then the life forms began to multiply and evolve on Earth. So, this gets around the need for all the perfect conditions to exist to create life in the primordial soup. But really all it does is put that on some other planet. Somewhere else, life still must be created, and you still have the same problems. So, it doesn't really solve the beginning of life, just the beginning of life on Earth. It makes that much easier. Okay, I've gone over just a few of the reasons why I think an intelligence is behind the creation of the universe and the creation of life. But let's investigate the Bible now. Just because there might be some type of intelligence that created the universe or created life doesn't necessarily lead to the Bible being true. There's all kinds of different religions and theories on that. So, let's investigate why I think the Bible is the one that makes the most sense. I will start off by saying that I don't think the Earth is only 6,000 years old, although there's definitely a large group of Christians who think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, commonly referred to as young Earth creationists. I don't believe that's what the Bible says. I know many Christians do, and that's okay. They'll disagree with me when I say that the universe is well over 6,000 years old. I think science has made some amazing discoveries and advancements. There's things we know now that we didn't know thousands of years ago. And looking at the age of the Earth and the universe, I think it's pretty overwhelming to say that the Earth is older than 6,000 years. Now, with that being said, I don't see anything where the Bible and science contradict. I think the main time you have a contradiction is when you have people saying the Earth was created 6,000 years ago, going up against science. I do believe the Earth is probably billions of years old. One of the first things that points me to the Bible is the various myths from early humans that seem to match with Bible stories. On every continent, there are people that have some type of flood myth, whether it's a global flood or a large local flood. The stories are pretty similar. There seems to be some type of event in early humanity that led all these cultures on every continent of the world to have some type of flood myth. This doesn't necessarily point to the Bible being correct about the flood myth and all the others being wrong. But there are many myths from early humanity that match with the Bible stories. In fact, one of the common theories is that the Bible was copied from other stories from earlier civilizations. Now, I think there's reasons why this is not the case, but there does seem to be some type of universal truth with all these stories, because it's across the globe, and they match up a little too well for it to just be something that they all came up with on their own. So I think there is some universal truth that early humanity has recorded that points back to these early stories. Now I'll add one caveat. It doesn't appear from scientific research or archaeology that there was a global flood in the Earth's past that wiped out all of humanity. But there does seem to be some type of event that is recorded and is also recorded in the Bible. And again, many Christians will probably disagree with me when I say that I don't think the Bible necessarily says the flood of Noah is a global flood. But just because there wasn't a global flood doesn't mean there wasn't any type of flood event that was the cause for all these stories. The Bible really starts first-hand knowledge with Moses. So all the stories before Moses were either given to him by God or an angel, or they were oral traditions that had been passed down. Or maybe there was some type of writing to pass these stories down. Probably a collection of all these, in some respect. But the Bible claims that Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. So that's really where we start getting first-hand knowledge of the events that happened. So to me, this is where archaeological evidence would start to match the Bible. We could find actual historical documents, events, places in the Bible, and expect them to be real, starting with the Exodus. Many secular archaeologists and scientists say there's no evidence for the Exodus, but Christian-leaning archaeologists disagree. I don't have all the answers there. The records from that time period are pretty far and few between. But as we progress through the Bible, there is archaeological evidence that confirms many of the cities, people, places, and events that have happened and were recorded in the Bible. There's evidence and recordings outside the Bible that do actually match the Bible. For example, for a long time, King David was thought to be a mythical person, but in 1993, there was evidence, or inscriptions, found that talk about the house of David, referring to David of the Bible. This pretty much confirmed that David existed. Now, did he exist as he did in the Bible? Well, you can still argue that, but it does confirm that he was a historical figure that actually existed. There are also inscriptions that talk about different battles that happened in the Bible, and they are confirmed in inscriptions from kings that were outside of the Bible that describe the same events that match up nicely with the Bible. One example is the Babylonian Chronicle, also known as the Jerusalem Chronicle. This is a clay tablet that describes Nebuchadnezzar's, the Babylonian king's, battle against Jerusalem. This matches the story in the Bible in 2 Kings chapter 24. So, while we don't have a full archaeological record that confirms everything in the Bible, there are definitely parts that have been confirmed. Now, one of the other knocks against the Bible is people say that it's been changed over time. As people copied down scriptures over the thousands of years, they couldn't have done it correctly. It's like the telephone game. You tell one person something, and by the time it gets around the circle to the last person, it's a totally different story. But the evidence actually proves to the contrary. One of the biggest finds for this is the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is a collection of biblical and non-biblical documents that were written between 3 BCE and 1 CE. For the most part, what we have from the Dead Sea Scrolls matches up with the Bible that we have today. There are a few little changes here and there, but nothing that changes or goes against any of the core beliefs in the Bible. Also, there's been multiple fragments found earlier than the Dead Sea Scrolls that have scriptures that pretty much match up with what we have in the Bible today. While we don't have the copies of the first 5 books of the Bible actually written by Moses, we do have scraps of different verses that have been found that match the Bible of today. It really goes against the theory that these stories have all evolved, there's all kinds of copying mistakes, and that you can't trust the Bible. Evidence we find says to the contrary. So, I've gone over a few of the reasons why I think the beginning of the universe and the origin of life points to intelligent design, and also some of the examples of the Old Testament matching with what we find in archaeology. But there's also the New Testament and Jesus. There also needs to be some type of proof for Jesus in order to believe the Bible. And at this point, it's almost certain that Jesus was a real person that lived. Now you can argue whether he was the Son of God and did all the miracles, but whether he was a real person that existed is pretty much certain. Of course, the Bible gives evidence for that, but is there evidence outside of the Bible that points to Jesus being a real person as well? And did people worship Jesus as God in the first century? One of the common objections out there is Jesus was just one of the many people that claimed to be the Messiah around that time. And while this is true, there is a reason why we still talk about Jesus, and we don't know the names of all the other people. Jesus' big proof that he was the true Messiah was that he was raised from the dead. There were people with first-hand knowledge that would have known whether he rose from the dead or not, and they believed he did rise from the dead. A couple of examples are several books in the Bible written by the Apostle Paul. 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Romans, Galatians, and 1st Thessalonians are said to be written between 50 and 60 CE. This is only 20 to 30 years after the death of Jesus. Outside of the Bible, Clement of Rome wrote a letter to the Corinthians, which most place in 96 CE. Both examples mention Jesus as God and that he was crucified and resurrected. This is not the case for all the others. And there is a reason why they've passed away into the pages of history and are not remembered, but Jesus is. I see this as evidence that he was raised from the dead. Also, the disciples in the Bible seemed a little weak in their faith before Jesus was crucified and raised from the dead. They all kind of walked away and stepped away from him in that whole crucifixion moment and distanced themselves from him because they didn't want to die. But after he was risen from the dead and they saw this, they became bold and brave and willing to put their life on the line for Jesus. And if this was some kind of hoax, I don't see why they would suddenly be bold and brave and willing to risk their life for a cause that they knew was false. To recap, the people that lived at the same time of Jesus believed he was risen from the dead, and the followers of Jesus went out teaching people this, which led to the explosion of Christianity. The other false messiahs of the time didn't live up to their claims, and people knew this, and that is why they aren't remembered today. So, while we may not have exact physical evidence of Jesus being risen from the dead, I do think there is good evidence that he actually was. One of the last points I'll bring up is consciousness. What makes us conscious, and why are human beings more conscious than all the other animals? We're the only ones with morality. Why are humans the only one with morality? Well, if you read the Bible, it tells you why. But evolution can't really explain this. So I think when you take the beginning of the universe, the beginning of life, the archaeological evidence for the Bible, the myths or stories that have been passed down throughout humanity that are at least similar to stories in the Bible, the archaeological evidence that the Bible has not really changed that much, and the people that would have known Jesus, or at least talked to people that knew him, believed he was raised from the dead. I think the evidence for a creator or an intelligence designing the universe is overwhelming, and I think there's pretty good evidence for the Bible itself being true. These are a few of the reasons why I think science actually points to a God or a creator, and the Bible itself being true. I will make more videos going into all these points in more detail, and many of the additional reasons I believe point to the Bible being true. If you would like to keep up with my journey, and that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you will be notified when these future videos come out.